Good morning, all. Thank you so much for attending today's webinar, Louisiana Leaders Education Briefing with Superintendent Kate Brumley, special remarks from Governor John Bel Edwards. I'm Kirby J. Nagel with United Way of Southeast Louisiana, and it's a pleasure to have you as attendees with us today. We'll just take care of a little bit of housekeeping here before we begin. We have a tight agenda and quite a bit of content to get to today from our distinguished speakers and our expert panelists. So we'll make sure that we bring all the content to you in a timely manner. Again, thank you for attending and registering. I'll run through the housekeeping today so you have an understanding of how this session will run. So just in case you have any connectivity issues as you're joining us today, just note that the webinar is being recorded and we will share it with you following this session on Monday in a follow-up email with a little more information that you need to know to stay engaged with United Ways across Louisiana and continue to be engaged with the work in the education space. If you do have any specific connectivity issues, again, look for that recording to follow in the coming days. And just a reminder that all participants will be muted and remain muted throughout the duration of today's session. We encourage you to use the chat box if you have any comments or thoughts that you'd like to share with either Superintendent Brumley or Governor Edwards or any of our expert panelists. We will share the chat log with today's speakers so that they can see the comments that you share with us. And a reminder that questions were submitted for the question and answer portion of today's session, which will happen at the end of our expert panel. And the United Way staff vetted those questions and selected 3 that we will pose to Superintendent Brumley. And again, those were selected based on the overarching themes from the questions that came in from our registrants. And so thank you again to everyone who submitted a question today. And with that, I'd like to begin the portion, because you certainly didn't come here to listen to me today. I'll run through the agenda very quickly and then kick it over to our welcome speaker, Michael Williamson, President and CEO of United Way of Southeast Louisiana. You hear special remarks from Governor Edwards, the vision of education continuum in Louisiana, our newly appointed State Superintendent of Education, Dr. Kate Brumley, and then a panel discussion from our 3 experts in the areas of early care and education, workforce development, and Alice households, specifically with a focus around equity in children, from Dr. Libby Saunier from Louisiana Policy Institute for Children, Michael Heck from Greater New Orleans, Inc., and Ron McLean, Institute of Mental Hygiene. As I mentioned, we'll follow with the brief question and answer segment and a closing from our COO, Charmaine Cassiope from United Way of Southeast Louisiana. And with that, I'd like to introduce our President and CEO, Michael Williamson.
Thanks, Kirby, and welcome everyone. Let me start off by offering a few thanks. First, I want to thank Governor Edwards for joining us today, and I'll introduce him in just a few moments. Also, Superintendent Kate Brumley, who's been a great friend to United Way during his time in Jefferson Parish, and we're excited to see his leadership now in Baton Rouge, serving the great state of Louisiana. Also, our United Way Southeast Louisiana Board Chair, Catherine McCrae, who I know is tuned in to listen in and hear the remarks for today. And also our panel experts, Libby Saunier, Michael Heck, and Ron McLean. And of course, you are attendees that have taken time out of your morning to join us, and we look forward to interacting with you throughout the webinar. Also to our staff that pulled this together, in particular, Pam Allison and Mary Johns, who've been behind the scenes kind of making this work. And of course, Kirby Jane Nagel, who's helped start us off. And then you'll hear from my friend and colleague, Charmaine Cassiope, a little bit later. Let me start out with just a few comments regarding our commitment to education. I think most of you that know United Way know that we've had a longstanding commitment to early care and education in particular, but the broader education continuum. So I want to highlight some of the work we've been doing. For example, the New Orleans Campaign for Grade Level Reading, which has been focused on increasing reading scores by 3rd grade, because we know the essential importance of that long term. The recently launched United for Early Care and Education that we launched in partnership with Agenda for Children and Loyola School Law to help stand up child care centers during a time we knew they needed much support. And then strong boots on the ground partners like Kingsley House, Rainbow Child Care Center, Agenda for Children, and many, many more that partner with us day in and day out to make sure the educational needs of our community are met. And we want to ensure that there are equitable access to educational opportunities, because we know that education is the key to long-term success, and ultimately know that it's the great equalizer preparing our young people for jobs into the future. We've been investing in education for a long, long time through direct service partnerships. And in particular, today we'll talk about some of the policy efforts that are going on as we hear from our speakers. But this is important to us. And so this time today is designed to tell you not only it's important to us, but hear from leaders in our state, our governor and Kate Brumley, and the panelists as I've mentioned. So with no further ado, I do want to introduce our governor, who you all know has had a longstanding commitment to education. He joined us several years ago in our fight for ALICE, the asset limited income constrained employed households that struggle every day in Louisiana. We just released the report yesterday, so that's out there now for you to see kind of how that data's changed, and we appreciate the governor's support of that. He's been a faithful supporter of United Way's across the state of Louisiana and been a dear friend to all of us. And so we know he's a very, very busy man. We thank him for his time today. So without further ado, I want to introduce our governor, the Honorable John Bell Edwards. Governor.
Michael, thank you very much. And it's good to be with all of you this morning. Good morning to you, Charmaine, as well. I do appreciate everything that United Way of Southeast Louisiana does for the people of our state, and really United Way all across the state and the country. It's great to be able to be with you this morning and to introduce Kate Brumley, our new Superintendent of Education. And I can tell you, he's been working nonstop since before he actually became the superintendent in order to make sure that we can meet the moment. And the moment is very, very difficult and challenging, as you all know, because we had to suspend school early in the spring, and it didn't resume for the remainder of the school year. And now we're starting this week to have schools open, districts open, some virtually, some with a hybrid opening. And we're doing that all across the state of Louisiana. And he's been working with our district superintendents, our teacher associations, our principal association, our school boards, you name it. And of course, that's in addition to the Bessie board and all of the folks he's leading at the Department of Education. We know this year is going to be different, and it's going to be harder in many respects than we want it to be. And we know that school is incredibly important, principally because that's how we educate our children and prepare them for the future. And there is nothing that will break the cycle of poverty that Michael was talking about better than educating our children as we want them to be educated. That's very difficult to do in a COVID environment. You all know that. And I can tell you that it's something that's important, not just for education, but for many, many children. And in Louisiana, more children than we would like to admit. But you all know the figures all too well. But for many of our children, the most stable part of their environment is school. That's where they access nutrition. That's where they access help with things like mental illness or other special needs. That's where their social and emotional wellness needs are being met. That's where everybody on the school property is a mandatory reporter if they suspect abuse and neglect. And of course, we haven't had our eyes on our children in many months. And so getting them back into school safely is imperative. And of course, safely is the key word there, as you all know. But there's a lot of work that has to go in to that. And that's why you're seeing it happen in so many different ways, where some parents have elected that their children will receive 100% virtual education. Others have opted into a hybrid of in-person and virtual or distance learning. You have some school districts where the middle school and high schoolers are going to be virtual. The elementary schools will not, but there's a hybrid approach because you can't have all kids on campus at the same time. Otherwise, you can't social distance. And of course, as you all know, the masking, the hygiene, all of that is incredibly important. I do want to give you all an update just a moment about COVID-19. Yesterday, we reported 1,343 new cases for a total that exceeds now more than 127,000 since the beginning. We also reported 50 new deaths across the state of Louisiana yesterday, and so we went past 4,000. It's now 4,028 deaths, tragically. Hospitalizations, 1,457 inpatient admissions across the state of Louisiana, COVID-19. That's down by almost 150 over the last 2 weeks. That's the best news that we have, because what we cannot do is lose our capacity to deliver life-saving healthcare in our hospitals. And we were on a trajectory really post Memorial Day, where our numbers were all going in the wrong direction. People presenting to hospitals with COVID-like symptoms, the test results that were positive, the percentage of test results that were positive, our hospitalizations, deaths, all the numbers were going the wrong way for several weeks post Memorial Day, which is why 3 weeks ago we put in the new restrictions and mitigation measures so that we closed bars for on-premises consumption. We mandated masks across the state, and we limited our social gathering sizes to no more than 50. You would expect that if you're going to see a positive result from that, it would happen about 2 weeks after the order became effective. And that's really what we saw. 2 weeks after that is when we started seeing the numbers start to flatten and then come down. And our gains have been relatively modest, but they've been steady. And as a result, we're in a better place. But we still have regions of our state that have increasing hospitalization, even though as a state as a whole, we are down. We still have every region of our state except for one, and there are 9 regions where the positivity of our tests are more than 10%. And it's because of the cases and the tests that the White House Coronavirus Task Force continues to have Louisiana as red, which means we had to take these additional measures, mitigation measures, and restrictions. But the good news is they're starting to pay off for us. And so we're in a better place today than we were a couple of weeks ago, but we still have a long way to go. We know these decisions work. I wanted to reassure all of you that they're based as best we can upon accurate and timely data and the science. And they have all been consistent with the recommendations coming out of the White House Coronavirus Task Force. And so it is no wonder then why yesterday a district court judge here in Baton Rouge upheld those decisions as being appropriate, and I would say more than appropriate, absolutely necessary, but also consistent with the authority that I have as governor under the Constitution and pursuant to the statutory laws of Louisiana, given what I have to do in order to protect the welfare of our people with a public health emergency. Moreover, I'm asking everybody on this call today to help me by setting a good personal example out there in wearing your mask, making sure that you do a social distance and so forth, and then promote this in the organization and in all the organizations that come together to support the United Way. We can actually get to a transmission rate of less than 1, which is the goal, without having to go back to phase 1 or to stay at home. But it does depend upon the degree to which we get people to wear masks and limit our gathering sizes. We believe that starting with Memorial Day, we saw cases increase, primarily driven by young people who are less susceptible to the disease, but they're nevertheless every bit as much contagious once they get it. And their activity caused a huge spike in people from 18 to 29 getting the disease. Their mobility then introduced it to others, and we saw our numbers spike. But where this is happening, it was in the bar rooms, and hopefully we've taken care of that, but it's also happening at wedding receptions and wedding showers and baby showers and birthday parties and pool parties and graduation parties. We really need your help in cracking down on these things and making sure that people are patient and understand just how risky that behavior is. So I want you all to know that we're doing better. I'm optimistic we're going to get through this, but we are in a new normal until such time as this virus leaves us. And it's not going to magically leave us. It's going to be with us until there is a vaccine, and probably more than one vaccine, that is mass produced and administered to a significant percentage of the people here in Louisiana, around the country, and indeed around the world. Don't know when that's going to be. But what I do know is the degree to which we can have our economy open, our schools open, and protect the safety and welfare of our people, especially by preserving our hospital capacity, it's all going to be driven by whether these mitigation measures, these restrictions are adhered to. We're seeing that all over the country. And I can tell you, Superintendent Brumley is taking the science very seriously. He has met extensively with our State Department of Health. We've looked at the CDC guidelines for how we open our schools safely, and done all the contingency planning. We worked very hard to get PPE where it needs to be, and so forth. And I want to tell you all, I'm excited about having him on board as superintendent. I look forward to working with him very closely, not just for this year, but for the remainder of the time that I'm governor. And look, it pains me to know that we're not here talking about the additional investment that we just made in early childhood education, or the additional investment that we made in again, increasing teacher pay or whatever. That's just not where we are right now with COVID-19. We should have been. In February, we had the fourth fastest growing economy in the country. Our revenues were coming in 10% ahead of the forecast, but that's no longer the case. So we have a new reality, but I know he is up to it, and he's going to work very hard with all the members of Bessie to lead the Department of Education in a responsive and responsible way. So I'm proud to introduce Dr. Kate Brumley today. I know that he has great thoughts on education in Louisiana overall, and I know that his philosophy will dovetail quite nicely with that of the United Way. And again, not just as it relates to COVID, but generally speaking and going forward long after COVID is gone. So I look forward to hearing Cade's thoughts, and Cade, at this time, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Governor, for that introduction, and thank you for your strong leadership. For those of you on the call, I've had the opportunity a number of times to sit with the governor and watch him deliberate and have to make decisions that the rest of the state just does not have to make. And none of these decisions are taken lightly. He relies on the facts and the science, and just appreciate, Governor, your leadership through this. And I know that it certainly weighs on you nonstop, and you can't disconnect from this, unfortunately. Michael, thank you for your leadership at United Way down there, and thank you for the years of partnership we've had together. And I think making education and life better for kids in that region, and all of the work that you've done to help that. I see Charmaine on the call, just a passionate fighter for early childhood education. I appreciate your work. I did a run through of the listing of participants, and I see just so many friends that I have, and thankful that they have joined the call today. As the governor mentioned, we are not in the place where we would like to be in terms of conversation on an everyday basis around education. And Michael, I thank you for giving me 3 hours to pontificate on education here this morning. I intend to take every minute of that. So I spend 90 to 95% of my time dealing with COVID right now and helping schools think through successful reopening. And so for just 5 minutes, I would just like to talk about what I want to talk about. And that's educating our children. So if you'll give me room for that before we talk about COVID, I would appreciate it. The greatest educational challenge we are going to face in our generation is early childhood education. It is the greatest educational challenge we will face. So many of our kids, over 50%, come to us not kindergarten ready. That means, Michael, you've heard me say a million times, they may not know green from red. They can't count to 10. And in some instances, they don't know their formal name. They just know a nickname. In some of our most impoverished communities, that number is 90% of kids that are coming to school not kindergarten ready. And so we have to, moving beyond COVID, continue to invest in early childhood education, not just in quantity in terms of the amount of seats available, but making sure we have quality seats for every child, because our public education system, our non-publics, go into catch-up mode immediately when kids are coming to them not prepared to enter into kindergarten. And so we have to continue to invest in that. Beyond that, we have to make sure that every child is on grade level in reading by the time they leave third grade. And not just third grade because that's a grade that I thought up in my head, but third grade because the research tells us that kids who cannot read on grade level by the end of third grade are 3 to 4 times more likely than their peers to be a high school dropout. And again, when you look at our impoverished communities, and you point some of this out in your Alice report, and thank you for sharing that, that number is even greater. So we have to make sure by the end of third grade that our kids are reading. Look, I'm going to skip a lot of grade levels here, but moving past that, career and technical education has to be a priority. For so long, we have told people that they are lesser than, that they don't have the value of other people who have a college education. And you all know right now, if you have a problem in your house, whether that's an electrical problem, a plumbing problem, you're almost going to pay whatever someone tells you to pay them to come and have that repaired. And so we have to do our part to elevate career and technical education in the state so that our high school students can exit with the ability to get a high paying job. And we've talked a lot about credentials and making sure kids have credentials when they graduate, but we have to make sure they have meaningful credentials. Credentials where we're not congratulating them on, here's a credential, you still get to live a life of poverty. We need to have credentials that they're able to exit high school with and get a good job, or be a stackable credential where a kid can move from a CNA to an LPN, or a CNA to an RN, or whatever that might look like. We really have to lift career and technical education in our communities, working with those community college systems so that the average age of a community college kid is not 27, but we're lowering that down. We're getting those students to them sooner so that there's not a gap in someone's life between 18 and 27 where they're just figuring it out. Let's help them figure that out. I think we need to work with our colleges and universities and input the lessons we've learned from the dual enrollment task force. We know that if we can connect a high school student with one of our Louisiana colleges and universities, they're more likely to go to that college and university, and furthermore, they're more likely to stay there past that first year in college. That college is more likely to retain them if they were a dual enrollment student with that university. And I'm tired of seeing our kids go out of state to colleges. You know, sometimes that is the best thing, but we need to be sure that we're making a play with our local colleges and universities, and I'm working hard with those system leaders to make sure that we can do that. As we do all of those things, we have to elevate the voice of the teacher. The teacher voice has to matter for us. Right now, we have to recognize that in the same way that our doctors and nurses were elevated, and rightfully so, as heroes during the spring, that we elevate those teachers and those leaders of those schools as heroes right now, because they're stepping into the front lines for us in COVID. And beyond that, it is the profession that begins all other professions. So we need to lift that teacher voice, treat them like professionals, and expect them to act like professionals. And we will do that together. So those are some of the most important things that matter to me educationally, Michael. But beyond that, I know we're talking about COVID, and I want to share some of the things that we have done to help ready our school systems to go into this space. I just exited a call with over 150 school system leaders throughout the state. And just for background, we have about 1,700 schools in our state, of traditional public, public charter, non-public. We serve about 800,000 students. Unfortunately, about 80% of those kids are living in a socioeconomic status that is not yet in the middle class for their families. So we recognize the challenges of that. We know that, I know that on that call that I just held with those 150 system leaders, we had system leaders who started their school year this week walking through some of the challenges that they faced, some of the things that went better than they expected, some of the preparations that they had done to enter into the school year. And it was just a great call. We had over 150 people just listening in that also lead systems. We had Dr. Welch from Louisiana Department of Health, and we had Dr. Billy, who's the chief of pediatrics at Ochsner. And I let them close out the call, and they both said that was the most inspiring call they have had in so long. And they were so thankful for what they heard and the preparations that our school system leaders and their teams had put into being ready for this school year. But all of that known, we also know we're going to get punched in the face. We are going to get hit when our schools open, and we have to make sure that we have really tight protocols so that we can handle that. I know the governor is very interested in us partnering with LDH to make sure that if we have someone who is symptomatic or who tests positive, that we have a very rapid response to that so that that spread isn't exacerbated in those school buildings. We worked along LDH, we worked alongside Ochsner, we worked alongside Children's Hospital and Tulane Medical Center, and our state board approved, thankfully on a unanimous vote, a set of minimum standards that all systems have to have in place if they're going to open their school year. The governor had signed into law Act 9 that asked our state board to do that. The state board did that in conjunction with those medical providers. And according to those providers, those standards are on par with or better than anything in the country. But this is still uncharted territory. These are unprecedented times. And we have to be prepared to be nimble, show each other grace, know that this could be a situation of starts and stops throughout the year, but simultaneously recognizing that 800,000 kids who haven't been in the school building since March the 13th, Friday the 13th, when the governor called and said we're not going back to school, it has an impact. And so we have to find a way, and we will find a way. So we set minimum standards around group size, around bus occupancy, how to disinfect, PPE for employees, a number of different things that we set in place that they have to make sure that they're adhering to before they be able to start their school year. And they are doing those things. They are connected with the regional medical directors from the Department of Health. And we think that they are as prepared as they can possibly be. But we don't know what the future holds. And we know that we'll have to respond to that as that happens. We know that we've seen schools open in some countries and they've been successful. We know that we've seen schools open in some countries and they have not. Recently read a report out of the New York Times that described Israel and the challenges that they've had in opening. And when you read further into that report, what you find is they did not tightly adhere to standards. And so on that call this morning, once again, we reinforced to leaders, you have got to make sure you are stressing the importance of face coverings, and the adults in the building are modeling that. You have to make sure that your teachers aren't congregating together. If you're having faculty meetings, don't put everyone in the same room at the same time. Don't have your principal and assistant principals in the same office at the same time, because if they go down, that could cause the whole school to go down. There are several important things that have to happen, and our systems are working through those. We think that if we follow these safety standards, we have a much greater chance of being successful in this school year. We also are really concerned about student learning loss. I've been concerned about summer learning loss my entire career because I know what kids look like and know when they come back from that summer. I'm a proponent of a more balanced calendar. We're asking systems to consider those, not adding additional days to the school year, but balancing those days out. I think now is the time to explore that and work through that. So, Michael, I think there might have been a set of questions just after a few opening remarks, but I appreciate the opportunity to be on the call. I appreciate the opportunity to echo the governor's comments of if we follow these minimum safety standards together, we have a greater opportunity of beating this virus. Look, it's us against the virus, and I think we're going to win because I believe in us.
Thank you so much, Superintendent Brumley. Before we get to those questions, as you mentioned, we are going to begin the segment of our today's event with our expert panelists. I'll introduce them once again, just for folks that may have come on a little bit late with us. We'll talk more around early care and education with Dr. Olivier Saunier from Louisiana Policy Institute for Children, the Executive Director. They're a good partner of United Way here in Southeast Louisiana and United Ways across our state. We'll have a discussion on workforce development opportunities with Michael Hecht, President and CEO of the Greater New Orleans, Inc., and a discussion on Alice households with children with Ron McLean, Executive Director of the Institute of Mental Hygiene here in New Orleans. And the way this will work for our participants, you're going to hear a brief set of remarks from our panelists, who will then ask for Superintendent Brumley's reflection and thoughts on the particular subject matter. Folks, as a reminder, if you do have questions, comments, thoughts that you'd like to share with Superintendent Brumley or Governor Edwards or any of our expert panelists today, please do use the chat box. Unfortunately, for timing sake, we won't be able to get to them today likely, but we will download the chat log and share them with them following this session. So please use that chat. And again, if you'd like to share it with the panelists, you can use the panelists only feature. If you'd like to share with all panelists and attendees, please make sure you drop down and select that option in the chat box so that we can continue a rich discussion in that space as well. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Dr. Libby Saunier, Executive Director from Louisiana Policy Institute for Children, for a discussion on early care and education. Thank you, Libby.
Kirby. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for having me. Before COVID-19, most child care providers operated on razor-thin margins. Recent surveys conducted by us in collaboration with United Way of Southeast Louisiana and others indicate that these businesses are deeply impacted by the pandemic. Nearly all surveyed providers indicated that they were losing money by mid-June, with the collective statewide loss in this sector estimated to be over $130 million. Early care and education businesses are in danger of closing down, putting teachers out of work, and permanently eliminating early care and education spots. Our cost modeling suggests that the pandemic continues. As it continues, the cost of providing safe, quality early care and education will rise and potentially require providers to raise tuition on parents if they want to remain financially viable. Even before COVID-19, there was a significant access gap for Louisiana's at-risk children ages birth to 3, with only 15% having access to publicly subsidized programs. Our report, The Balancing Act, surveyed low-income working parents who qualified for child care assistance, but who did not receive it. It found that parents are making nearly impossible choices to afford child care so they can go to work or go back to school, including borrowing money or forgoing necessities like food or utility payments, much like the Alice report indicates. If providers close permanently or have to raise tuition prices, our access problem will become even more significant. Again, even before COVID-19, our studies showed that Louisiana lost $1.1 billion a year of revenue due to childcare breakdowns. Studies replicated in other states found similar results. COVID-19 hasn't just been a public health crisis for our state. It's been an economic crisis, with an unprecedented number of Louisiana's filing for unemployment benefits. The childcare sector is every bit as essential to our economy as transportation and electricity. And if these businesses close, if they have to raise tuition prices, it will be a detrimental effect to our overall economy. We don't know the magnitude of that effect, but it will most certainly be bigger and larger than $1.1 billion a year that we were losing before COVID-19. And finally, and really, quite frankly, the most troubling thing is that research shows that children who suffer developmentally during economic downturns. Science indicates that children experience delays in development when their families experience increased stress and have limited resources due to the economic downturn, like that we're facing now. The earliest years are the most critical in terms of development, with 80% of brain development occurring before age 4. Which is why it's so critical that these children have access to quality early care and education if their parents are at work and or in school. Prior to the pandemic, 35% of Louisiana kindergartners started school behind peers. As Dr. Brumley just indicated, it's as high as 90% of kindergartners who do not arrive at school ready to learn. Children who start behind tend to remain behind, which is why I'm so proud that our organization, the United Way of Southeast Louisiana, and many other organizations from across the state have come together to create the Ready Louisiana Coalition, where we're dedicated to advocating for increased support for quality early care and education. This is a crucial moment in our state. So Dr. Brumley, how does our state really support these financially vulnerable businesses and also create access to quality early care and education for our infants, toddlers, and 3-year-olds over the short term and long term as we recover from the pandemic?
Yeah, so this is a real challenge as you laid out. It's one of those issues for many families where they're having to make an impossible choice. You know, I can't afford to live without going to work, and I can't afford to send my child to daycare or early child center because I can't go to work. And so they're making impossible decisions because the opportunities aren't there in terms of equity for every single family. Libby, just want to thank you for your work and continuing to push us to make sure that we have the right policies and practices in place, and I know you'll continue to do that. I saw Melanie Bronfin's name on the call too, and want to also likewise give a shout out to her and recognize her for her most recent honor. I know that she's being recognized for some of her work in the space too, so I want to thank her for her leadership. But like you mentioned, we're in catch up from day one, you know, and I think that we have to marry early childhood education with literacy efforts, because when we talk about literacy through grade 3, I mean, while we can talk about early childhood being B through age 3 or B through age 4, literacy in grades 3 is still early childhood as well. And so I think we have to marry all of that together, and we have to make sure that we have a strategy for how we're handling that. I think pre-COVID, I was more excited about early childhood's progress than ever before. And I think not just at the state level with our state legislators, but also at the local level. When you look at Orleans alone and the investment that they were going to make into early childhood education, when you look at other chambers of commerce and business groups that were likewise having these conversations with elected officials at the local level. I know some of this was happening in Jefferson. I see Paula Polito on the line. She has a great site there as well that people could tour. So having the opportunity pre-COVID to see so much energy and synergy happening around early childhood education was really important. But the reality is COVID hit, and that stalled out a lot of that progress. And it stalled it out from an attention mindset, but it also stalled out economically. And so we have to overcome both of those things. We have tried to push in additional funds to support early childhood education centers. And I believe as of today, we're up to, I think, 74% of early childhood centers that are back in operation. And we know those margins are tight. And we know that at the state level, we have to be here to support you as much as possible. And we're committed to doing that. If I'm saying early childhood education is the greatest educational challenge of our generation, I can't just say that and not be there to support it. And so we're going to continue to be there to support that. But likewise, I'll share with you, I don't have all the answers. I have to depend on the experts, such as people on this call, to help me better understand challenges and what could be solutions for those challenges. So I just thank you for the continued partnership.
Thank you so much, Libby and Superintendent Brumley. Certainly you can see by the chat, this is a topic of great interest for folks on the call and for our United Way of Southeast Louisiana and United Ways across the state. And with that, we'll transition into another key element of education for the success and future education in Louisiana and our children, which is workforce development opportunities for learners. And I'd like to introduce Michael Heck, President and CEO of Greater New Orleans, Inc., to bring that topic to you, Superintendent Brumley.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Superintendent Brumley. I'm here talking to you from my mobile office. It's really a pleasure. First, just want to thank Governor Edwards for his leadership, especially during this crisis. I think it's been a real model for the rest of the nation. And Superintendent, congratulations on your new job, and thank you for your past leadership in Greater New Orleans. And my good friend Michael Williamson, thank you for being such a great partner and friend and inspiration. And it's really a joy to work with you. To Dr. Sanye, I want to note for everybody on this call that last year, GNO Inc. adopted early childhood education as a priority for the first time in our 112-year history. And I think that that's a recognition of how effective everybody on this call has been, and having people understand that early childhood education is both a moral and a financial imperative. So, good work and onwards. Speaking specifically about workforce development in Louisiana, what we have done is taken something that's been, or that was previously, a liability for the state, quite frankly. And over the past decade, we've turned it into a strength. And in fact, Louisiana was just recognized as having the #1 workforce training program in the country for the 11th straight year in a row. And that's such a competitive advantage for us, because what we tend to see happens is that when we're talking to a company, we'll qualify based on our low costs and our high culture, but we will win based on our workforce and based on our workforce training ability. Probably the most recent dramatic example of that was DXC Technology, the biggest workforce training win in the history of Louisiana, 2,000 jobs. And after the announcement, we took them out for dinner and gave them a little truth serum, a little white truth serum and red truth serum. And we said, "Why'd you do it?" And their answer was so insightful. They said, "Well, you guys were definitely a low-cost provider, and we love New Orleans for recruiting young people, but it was the workforce training ability that we saw from your from early K-12 to higher education to your nonprofits. That dedication and nimbleness and partnership gave us confidence that we can grow 2,000 jobs here." So it's an enormous competitive advantage for us. Now, looking forward, we're moving into this post-corona environment, hopefully sooner rather than later. And I think what's important to note is that crises like these tend to not create new opportunities. They tend to accelerate trends that were already there, for better or for worse. And in workforce, that's definitely the case. So our analysis indicates that some of the biggest opportunities for us going forward are, first of all, going to be in tech, because technology jobs are coming back home. I talked to a company and they said, when we had a work from order home in the US, we could work from home. Our workers in India couldn't work from home. So we're going to be bringing workers home. Analogously, you're seeing in manufacturing, supply chain being repatriated back from China. And of course, Louisiana has great ability in terms of our assets like the river or our workers or our low utility rates for manufacturing. So you're going to see that. Logistics, huge opportunities in logistics because of our river, our 6 Class 1 railroads, our highways. So you're going to see a lot of things involving robotics and involving large distribution facilities all around the entire region. We're talking to some food manufacturers about doing value-added food processing on the river, prepackaged salads, prepackaged meals, another trend that's been accelerated now because of Corona. Healthcare, I think this is all pretty obvious. Telemedicine, no doubt. Infectious disease, where Louisiana has been a leader in this since, frankly, yellow fever. We helped find the cure for Ebola, and we're going to play a big role here in COVID-19. I also would put a note on neurodegenerative diseases and neurology, because the reality is that diseases like Alzheimer are unfortunately going to be the growth disease as the population over 65 doubles by 2050. But again, all of our universities and our hospitals are making strides here. So it's a big opportunity for us there as well. And so I think just in a general way, what we have to do is manage the crisis like we're doing so well today, but also recognize that if we put in the right training, beginning at early childhood, up through K-12 superintendent, then with our LCTCS schools, I'm just coming now from a mechatronics signing program down at Nunez, which is a groundbreaking apprenticeship program, except that it's not groundbreaking because they've been doing it in Germany for 200 years, but it's groundbreaking for us. All the way to what I'd call non-traditional training, incumbent work and training, training in SNAP and ENT, big opportunities. Let me end by saying about our partnership with United Way. So excited about our partnership with United Way. We're specifically going to be looking at trying to address the digital divide with ALICE workers, and with SNAP participants. And so basically what we're going to be doing is GNO Inc. is going to be doing the analysis on where the gaps are in terms of future demand, particularly in tech that's coming down to our region. And then we're going to work with Michael and with United Way to figure out who are the right service providers to get this training to our workers. In case you don't believe me about all this opportunity in tech for all of our people here in New Orleans, just this morning hit my inbox that Amazon named us top 10 in the country for growth in tech jobs. And then within that, we know from our own analysis that we are number 5 for African Americans holding those jobs and number 3 for women holding those jobs per capita. It's inclusive. So this is an outstanding opportunity for us to give more opportunity to our ALICE workers. And I couldn't be prouder and more excited than to be partnering with everybody on this call here. And so I guess my offer and my question to the superintendent coming out of this is, the business community is invested intellectually and emotionally and financially like I've never seen before. What can we do to support you in your mission?
Thanks, Michael. First of all, so many people have to go their entire lifetime before they get an office with a window. So congratulations on that nice space that you have.
Yeah, it's actually the corner office. You can't quite see it, but it is, yeah.
So one of the reasons I think we were successful in Jefferson in flipping trajectory on the system was because of our partnership with the business community. Individuals such as yourself and your strong leadership there for the entire region, working alongside also Stephen Wagesback at the state level, but the local leaders there, the Todd Murphys at the Jefferson Chamber, the Lisa Jennings at West Bank Industrial, Tony Legee, who was at JBC, Jerry Bologna at JEDCO, all of those individuals really all going in and recognizing together that education is the key to growing that. And in the GNO area specifically, it's such a dynamic, exciting opportunity for partnerships between both pre-K-12 and higher ed to be able to partner with the business community. I feel strongly about our need in K-12 to accelerate some of the work that has already happened with the Jumpstart career technical education work. I don't think it's been aggressive enough. I think there are real opportunities still where we can be more aggressive in our career and technical training for our students. And I look forward to some policy recommendations down the road on how we might do that. And I would appreciate everyone's support whenever we start talking about being more aggressive with career and technical education. At the same time, those partnerships with colleges and universities through dual enrollment are equally important. And with both of those things, both technical education and college and university training, we have to be smart about knowing what are the jobs going to be, and not just preparing people for jobs that aren't going to exist, but preparing people for jobs that will exist so that they can be successful, they can contribute to the economy, they can help take care of their families, they can be taxpayers to support our government operations. And I think more than anything, staying connected with each other, not just myself, but members of our team, and saying, hey, here is a need. Let's work together to solve this. For those of you on the call that know me, and again, I see many people who I've worked with before, you know, if you just connect with me and say, here is a challenge, let's see if we can work this out, I'm typically interested in helping you find a way to do that. So I would just ask that everyone continue to do that as they work with me and my team.
Thank you so much, Michael and Superintendent Brumley. We'll move quickly here to our last expert panelist, Ron McLean, Executive Director of the Institute of Mental Hygiene, a good friend of United Way's in our partnership around the Campaign for Grade Level Reading here in New Orleans, and also a longstanding advocate for ALICE. Ron, please take it away.
Thanks, Kirby. And let me also thank Charmaine Cassiope and Michael Williamson, of course, from United Way, for their leadership in bringing us together to discuss strategies that will increase the resilience of vulnerable children during these most challenging times. But one way of doing that is advancing equity. We know much of the vulnerabilities faced by struggling families result from long-standing inequities. So strategies to help vulnerable families must include a focus on eradicating systemic issues that are responsible for creating the inequities in the first place. We all know that the economic effects of COVID-19 will have significant lasting impacts on all of us, but it will be worse for the most vulnerable families in our community. The United Way shed light on these often overlooked households with the publication of the Alice Report, which was updated in 2020 and actually released yesterday. ALICE stands for families that are income constrained, asset limited, and employed. These are the working poor who often show up today as essential workers. These are folks also disproportionately impacted by challenges with success in education, and of course, the access for resources that are gonna help them move forward within systems that they interface with: education, healthcare, the business systems, all of them. One of the more significant challenges faced by these families is childcare affordability and accessibility. So why should leaders of public schools be concerned about childcare? You know, public schools are generally K to 12. What's in it about childcare? And certainly Superintendent Brumley highlighted and emphasized the fact that they should be. This was also highlighted by a recent Gallup poll that found 80% of US public school superintendents say their state is investing too little in early care and education programs. Not only do the majority of public school superintendents say investment in these programs is inadequate, they also say, some 77% of them also say that early care and education is most important. It's a great deal in terms of the long-term success of students in school. However, few of these leaders say that most young children in their states are getting the early preparation that they need. Very few. This is consistent, of course, with what Superintendent Brumley has already mentioned. We all know that third grade reading is a significant educational milestone. Reading at grade level, mastery level or above by the end of third grade is a major turning point in a child's educational trajectory. Economically disadvantaged students and African American students are underrepresented in schools where the majority of third graders score mastery or above in English language. These are students who have challenged with school readiness, with chronic absence, and some are learning loss. The need to respond to these sorts of disparities are critical. The New Orleans Campaign for Grade Level Reading is a collaborative of leaders from government, business, education, families, and the nonprofit sector who have committed to working together for the next decade to increase the number of New Orleans students who are reading at grade level by the third grade. Reading proficiency is essential. This collective impact effort to increase reading proficiency represents the kind of proactive strategies that have been effective in addressing the significant racial disparities in educational success. Recognizing that school readiness is a critical indicator of reading proficiency, the Grade Level Reading Campaign has worked really hard over the past 3 years to increase the availability of quality childcare seats for low-income families in New Orleans. We were really excited about the leadership of the mayor and the City Council of New Orleans for making investments in early care and education. The City of New Orleans in 2017 initially allocated $750,000 to the Early Childhood Education Network. It was the first time the city had done so, and no other city in the state has done that. We were really happy and pleased. The money created a pilot program to pay preschool expenses for a limited number of children up to age 3. In the next 2 years, this investment increased to $3 million per year, and we're optimistic about a similar allocation for 2020. But certainly it's not enough. It's not enough. We have to continue our work. Our hope is that other municipalities in Louisiana make similar investments. In the Urban Leagues of Louisiana's recent report advancing educational equity for public schools in New Orleans, educational equity is defined as an ongoing process that removes historical barriers and creates a system of opportunity by which all students have the necessary resources to reach their full potential. And as Michael, Heck, and others have indicated, technology is a huge piece in terms of the resources, and we know that there's a significant disparities there in terms of access and availability of technology for these ALICE families and even those who suffer with poverty. We have some work to do, folks. However, the first step is embracing the facts as they exist regarding the systemic inequities that have historically and continuously plagued our school system. We have to recognize also the effects that these historical inequities have had on our vulnerable children and therefore the greater community. So to Superintendent Brumley, how can we support you in advancing educational equity and also resourcing additional early care supports?
Thanks, Ron. You shared so much there that I don't think I have to share much. You did a great job with that. I think we have to approach everything we do with an equity agenda in mind, realizing that the needs are different across the state. And equity, I don't think in its totality simply means the financial state of a family, but it also could mean in our state, urban versus rural needs, for instance, and making sure that we're meeting all of those needs on point. Whenever I think about schools that have persistently underperformed, there are certain things that matter, and you have to lead those schools with an equity agenda in mind. Number one, there's nothing more important than a high quality teacher with a robust curriculum. So we have to make sure that we're increasing the teacher pool, and we have to find a way to do that. We have to make sure that all of our kids have access to high quality resources. And unfortunately, in our most impoverished communities, that has not always been the case. They have had resources that have not been on grade level, and it's prevented some of their progress. So we need to make sure that that's in place. We also recognize that we have to bridge this digital divide that is so important right now. I know Senator Mizell was on the call earlier. She's leading a lot of that work in the state legislature. That's really important. Early childhood is a big piece of that, giving families choice so that they can make a good decision on the school that they would like to see their child be in. And you know, I know our time is running out, and the hosts are getting a little nervous about that. So there's so much to talk about, and time is limited. There's no silver bullet. We just have to have so many strategies that are the right strategies. We have to add value to the work that has already been done in Louisiana to just continue to make it better.
Thank you so much, Ron and Superintendent Brumley. You're right. You can't see my leg shaking under the table, so we're good on timing. I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to put you on the spot and encourage, if you don't mind, these questions that we vetted. We're going to get them to your office, and if you could provide just a few remarks on those, we'll share them out with the attendees. Listen, our follow-up email, that way we can get to those as well. But folks, we want to make sure we have time to hear from Charmaine Cassiope. Thank you for everyone who joined with us today. Charmaine, if you will close us out at this point, we'd love to hear from you.
Well, thank you very much, Kirby. And I want to begin by saying heartfelt and sincere gratitude to our Governor, John Bel Edwards, who, as Michael said, has truly been a champion. I think we aggravate his office more than any other at the state capitol, but he's got a superb team, and he is always available to listen to us. For that, we are immensely grateful. Superintendent Brumley, I cannot thank you enough. I know how full your plate is. This conversation is rich, but it was incredibly beneficial to me in the role that I play in policy and advocacy to have worked so closely with you in Jefferson Parish. And our Ready Start network in Jefferson is really a profoundly important piece of the work that we are doing. As an advocate, I'm advocating at the local, state, and federal level. And we can't do that if we cannot access and make ourselves available to have these kind of conversations today. So God bless you for your leadership, and we want you to know that we are always here to support you and all of our education needs. I want to especially thank Libby, Michael Heck, and oh my God, Ron. I think it's fair to say that you have exemplified today that nothing we achieve at the United Way of Southeast Louisiana do we achieve alone. We live the philosophy we have, and that is you have one life to live, you must live united. It is because of your level of expertise, your resources, and the commitment that you make that our United Way is able to achieve the successes we have realized at the local, state, and federal level. And I think what has illuminated today in this conversation is I want to applaud all of our United Ways who are investing in our Alice report. It supplements the critical necessity to base all policy and advocacy in the tremendous work that we are doing that is well researched. That's why we're so successful. Libby's research is so important to the reason we are able to have the level of success that we have. I applaud the United Way Board of Trustees for the work and their commitment to allow us to do policy and advocacy. And I want you to know that I couldn't be more thrilled about the fact that you should all be astutely aware that currently we are funding some 20+ educational programs throughout our 7-parish region. We are making it possible for high quality early care centers to thrive and to really be able to reopen and to be a part of the lives of the children we value in our region. I could tell you that our Ready Louisiana Coalition is demonstration that for us, we do in fact have a shared vision and a commitment around all of everything we have to do at the state level, the federal level, and the local level to ensure that we are bringing everyone to the table. So Michael Heck, the fact that business has come to the table with us and has embraced our call to action for why we know the economic implications around education are so important, I say thank you for your profound leadership. You were so impressive, and having you with us is just incredibly rewarding. I know when it comes to the equity piece, our Alice report, as you so eloquently said, Ron, re-emphasizes our commitment. If United Way, I can tell you part of our blueprint for prosperity was to make sure that the emphasis of everything we do, we see through the lens of equity. I want to also applaud the New Orleans City Council yesterday and my dear friend Helena Moreno, who so eloquently introduced a resolution that hopefully will result in a collaborative with the mayor's office to really look at how we access and make available as a utility complete Wi-Fi coverage for all of New Orleans children. Again, I believe New Orleans is setting the pace and demonstrating to us we all have a role to play when it comes to education, and we must do it to our highest level. So with that, I close. Thank you to everyone who took time out of their busy schedules to participate with us. It shows me that you care about United Way and the work that we are advancing in this community. And may God bless you all, and may you all remain safe.
Thank you, Charmaine. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Charmaine.
Thanks,
Thank
Mike.
you, Michael.